Hi, everybody, and welcome to the new episode of the Endless Celts podcast. I hope everyone that's listening is keeping well and keeping safe during these tough times. But hopefully we can bring a bit of joy back into their lives, talking all things Celtic Football Club. I'm delighted to be joined by a show regular, Anthony Dunn. How are you, Anthony?
I'm good, mate. Hope all you guys are doing well too. It's great to be back on.
Yeah, no problem. Great to have you on. I'm sure we're going to get stuck into some topics. Anyway, there's so much to talk about. And also joining us is a very special guest from the Celtic blog, James Forrest. How are you, James?
I'm all right, mate. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. And we appreciate you doing this for us, man. It's very much appreciated within the channel. And we're going to talk about some stuff regarding Celtic Football Club. Before we get on to the topics that is in everyone's minds in terms of management and the structure, I just want to touch upon the game that was seen in the weekend, just briefly anyway. I'll go to yourself, James, first. What did you think of the game against Falkirk?
I think it wasn't a great shock if we won, of course. What I was surprised at is the fact that we maintained the pace of the game for 90 minutes. We covered every blade of grass, and the players never stopped. It's the first time this season that I've seen us play for 90 minutes, without let up, without pause. And I was quite impressed by that. I think maybe whatever's happening in training is getting done slightly differently is maybe now having an effect. Maybe we're starting to see what Kennedy can do. I also wonder if maybe it's something to do with Stephen McManus's promotion, because I noticed he was very animated on the touchline during the match. So maybe he's having some impact. But they played for 90 minutes. They ran for 90 minutes. It's the first time I've saw them do that for a while, so I was very encouraged by it.
Yeah, I think you actually bring up some good points there. I think over the three matches he's been in interim charge, we've had something like 92 shots. But the thing that concerns me, Anthony, is the fact we've only managed to score 5 goals within them 3 games. Now, 3 of them goals came against League One opposition in terms of Falkirk, but as James rightly pointed out, Celtic didn't stop. It was kind of pressure after pressure, attack after attack. Is that what you took away from the game, Anthony?
Yeah, absolutely. It was. It's always. I actually think this is the first time I've been on the back of a win. So it's quite nice to be on tonight. I thought that the game, like you say, it was a professional job. Against lower league opposition in the cup. The most important thing is just getting into the next round. But as James says, there was a lot more energy in the team, particularly in the second half. They kept that going. There's been quite a lot of times we've started games well this season, and it's just sort of petered out. But it was great seeing James's namesake on the pitch, back amongst the goals as well. And I thought Rosgage and Turnbull, they connected quite well. It was quite surprised to see Tom to start the match, but I thought him and Turnbull worked well again, especially second half. And 3 goals, you can't complain. And but of course the pick of the bunch was El Yunusi's wee touch of class over the goalkeeper. It was brilliant.
Yeah, that their goal, it just reminds you of like I know this is a very hard comparison, but like a Larson finish, like the chip, the wee dink over the keeper.
Yeah,
sometimes
cheeky.
That's the sort. Yeah, that's the type of intelligence that you're crying out for when you see players playing for Celtic and make stupid, rash decisions instead of taking their time and thinking they're through properly. I think during the match as well, there was plenty of opportunities for the likes of Griffiths to hit a shot on target, but it didn't really work out for him. Just before we move on, James, I'll go back to you for this one. In terms of the players in that game, who impressed you?
Well, I think you can build the whole team around David Turnbull right now. I think he's one of the most exciting prospects I've seen in the Celtic team in a long time. Like yourself, though, I was impressed by how well he worked with Tom Rogic, because it was one of my complaints when I saw the team selection. I did not know how those two would play in the same team together, but they did really well. It worked for some reason. I just wonder if maybe that's something the next manager's going to look at. But Turnbull's a class act. You can build the whole team around this guy, and I hope we do. And I think Stephen Welsh looks better in every game that I watch him play. He really does look like the one gold nugget from the whole entire horrible season is that he's had an extended run in the team, and he looks like he'll be at the centre of the defence for a long time.
Yeah, I think we all echo that in this channel, and that we always speak about Stephen Welsh. It's just unfortunate his chance in the team actually came by accident instead of performances regarding him in the youth setup and stuff. But he's been fantastic, and I think the partnership he struck up with Vire is quite good. But you just don't know if Vire's going to stay, or is he going to sign a contract, become our new captain. That's another question up for debate. But moving on from the game, we'll go on to the topic that everyone was looking for this morning, which was the announcement of Eddie Howe, which didn't come. What we did see was Dominic McKay. He's starting early, right about the 19th of April. Anthony, do you think this would be one of Eddie Howe's demands, getting the structure in place first before he takes over? Or is it more that the McKay wants in as soon as possible to fix what's went wrong?
I'm not obviously sure if it's something that Howe himself has demanded, Stephen. What I'm glad is that McKay's going to be in the building a lot sooner than we originally expected. You know, as I've spoke before on this channel, rugby isn't my speciality point, but the improvements at Murrayfield have been clear for all to see the last couple of years. So, yeah, it's great he's coming in there in a sort of transitional phase before, you know, getting the title in the summer. So that's a plus. To coin a wee phrase for the maestro himself, it creates a wee buzz about the place. But, you know, I'm like everyone else, you know, you kind of hoped that we were hoping that Eddie Howe was going to be announced today as well. But I think as the weekend went on, we've seen that probably wasn't going to be realistic. But I would say if he has agreed, I would have him in as soon as possible, if the circumstances allow, and then you can just sort of, you know, start the rebuild or try and end this season on a high, and obviously start the rebuild for next year as quickly as possible. Yeah,
I think as well, I've seen quite a lot of fans, well, maybe not the majority, but you get the minority as well, that's coming out and saying that it seems like Eddie Howe, from what they're reading, is trying to make these demands before he even agrees to take the job. I know we've seen reports that he's agreed the job in principle, kind of a verbal agreement, but obviously no paperwork's been signed. What do you think about the whole Dominic McKay starting early, James? Is your opinion that it is Eddie Howe kind of pushing this, or are you more on board with what Anthony said?
Well, he's probably not pushing the CEO issue very hard, but it certainly sounds as if he wants to say in who the director of football is going to be, and I can understand that to an extent. While I agree that it's probably not a good idea to let the manager pick the people he works for any more than it's a good idea to let the players pick the manager, I can understand that he would prefer to work with somebody who he's worked with before and who he knows well and who he absolutely trusts. And I think if he's got a good partnership with Richard Hughes, and you know, if Hughes has got the credentials and is acceptable to the Celtic board, I think it would be an excellent idea to have two guys in there who know each other and have worked together before and kind of know each other's ways of working and stuff. I mean, David Webb was also linked with a director of football job, and he's also worked with Howe. That to me just makes more sense than bringing in somebody like Fergal Harkin, who's never worked with him before and who is more comfortable dealing with the directors because he's apparently a friend of Desmond's. Well, I would rather that the director of football was a friend of the manager than a friend of the largest shareholder. That makes
Yeah. I think what you make there about Harkin, I think they've kind of they want Harkin in, they want him announced, but obviously as Eddie Howe wants Richard Hughes in, it's kind of free a wee bit in the basket, and it's like they've came to a crossroads. But if Eddie Howe is announced in the next couple of days to take over as Celtic manager, James, do you think he should come in straight away and evaluate the team for the next season, or do you think he should hold off until the end of the season?
I have a personal preference on that. I think I would like to see him come in straight away. I'd like to see him get the 10 games or whatever is left to assess the team properly, to put his tactical ideas across. There are players who obviously we're going to have to make a decision on in the summer. And the sooner he's in there and the sooner they see what he's got in mind and he can explain to them what he's got in mind, the sooner we might get decisions from someone like Ryan Christie to stay for an extra year or two. Maybe I don't think we'll keep Eddie under any circumstances. I think Eddie's made up his mind to go and he's going to go and we'll get a bundle of money for him. And in that regard, I think that it would be good to see Howe come in so that he can do that proper evaluation and start getting his ideas across and stamp his imprint on this team. On the other hand, this isn't his team, and it doesn't matter if he comes in and does spectacularly well in the next 10 games. It's not going to be his team next season. And there is an element of it that makes me think he's going to balk at the idea of coming in to clean up someone else's mess. If I were in his shoes, I wouldn't come right now. because it really is put in a very difficult position. I mean, what if we go to Ibrox and lose, God forbid, right in the cup, and he's the manager, and that's his start? You know, the press is going to say Gerrard's got one over on him right away, and then he goes to Ibrox again in the league in a couple of weeks' time. That doesn't go so well either, and all of a sudden his record is 0-2 or 1 draw or 1 defeat or whatever it's going to be. And this is the worst possible start for the guy. The press will be on his case right away. There'll be a section of your support, by the way, who will also be on his case right away and will be screaming that the wrong decision has been made. And I just don't see any upside for him in doing it. But I hope to God that he does. I hope to God he's one of these guys who's like, you know what, I'm confident enough. I'll come in and I'll turn this around and I'll start my Celtic career with a Scottish Cup. Why shouldn't he believe that? But if he goes the other way, I will completely understand why.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you actually brought that up in terms of him. If he comes in now, you can kind of see if the results don't go well against Rangers, that the fans would ultimately, some section of the fans would be like, what's going on here? Why has there been no improvements? And obviously that's quite a glaring thing, because if he comes in, he's trying to put his imprint, as James rightly says, this is not his team, and majority of the personnel won't be there next season. So you're looking at it, if Eddie comes in now and it goes kind of, coin the phrase, tits up from now till the end of the season, do you think the support can accept that that's the way it might go until he gets his own players in?
I think the more rational thinking amongst their support, which I would like to think is the vast majority, would see it the way that James just sort of outlined it there, that would, you say it's not his team, this has been a disastrous season, let's just get it out of the way and we start again. But, Twitter and Facebook, you only have to go onto the comments at the moment, and he's not even signed. He's not even in the door officially. And some of the comments you read, you just your head's in your hands. That he's never done anything, and But by the way, and I know we'll come on to this later on in the show. Not just supporters with touchscreens, right enough. Ex Celtic players in the media are coming away with the exact same, and it's just like, this guy's literally not even in the door yet, and he's on to a hard time. Like you say, it's James is kind of quite described well both scenarios there. It is quite high stakes, but I must admit, nothing would give me greater satisfaction than the turning up in his soft-spoken way that he is, but quiet, steely guy, and just wiping the smile off Gerrard's face. I mean, it would really start the summer off well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be a dampener, but I like to be a bit, do you know what I mean? A bit impartial as the host. But I've seen a few reports come out saying, James, obviously we all see Twitter, we all see Instagram, and quite rightly so. It's full of rumours at the minute. And there's starting to creep in that the likes of Crystal Palace are wanting to speak to Eddie Howe, the likes of Newcastle. Yeah. We know he's already rejected Sheffield United for the Celtic job. But do you think if this keeps dragging on any longer, that Eddie Howe is going to stick around, James?
Again, there are two schools of thought here. This guy either wants to do something special at a special club, or he wants money. Basically, I mean, that's that. I mean, he's either wants to come to a special club and win things and establish a legacy and build something, or he's going to go where the money is. Right now, you can say, as some will say, that there's also an ambition element to it, that he would rather be, in the kind of league that can satisfy a manager's, footballing ambitions, as opposed to coming to a backwater like Scotland. The truth is, though, what is he going to achieve at Crystal Palace? Right? If he goes there, it's for money. It's for nothing else. And he won't be able to dress it up as for football reasons, right? Because Crystal Palace are a mid-table team. If they're that, if they're not going to be hovering in the relegation zone, the best he'll accomplish is about a mid-table position. He could have stayed at Bournemouth if he wanted that. He could have taken a shot at the Sheffield United job or one of the other jobs that'll involve just existing on the Premier League level. I mean, there are some managers who might be content to take the money and exist on the Premier League level. Other ones want to go and win things and challenge for honours and play in Europe and stuff and manage in Europe and stuff like that. And if Howe isn't one of those guys, if Howe wants to go where the money is, then let him go where the money is. his star will fade in due course, as all of these guys do. If the guys who chase the money, these are no guys who win things. These are no guys who are going to go and challenge for honours anywhere.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And as I always said, Celtic Football Club is one of the biggest clubs in Europe and in the world with the biggest fan bases. As you've rightly said, if you're going to the likes of Crystal Palace and Sheffield United, you're chasing the money, you're chasing the big pay packet at the end of the month, and that's not what you need at Celtic. You need someone who's going to be there, who's going to be committed, who wants to take Celtic forward. And I don't mean just for 2 or 3 years, but I mean a longer term kind of value there as well. Because you don't want someone coming in, beefing their name up, and then the first job down in England, they're away, they're catching flames down the M1 back to England. That's not the sort of thing Celtic need. What about you, Anthony, in terms of the likes of Crystal Palace and Sheffield United? I mean, James, he summed that up perfectly. He's chasing the money if he goes there, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these clubs, the be all and end all for them is mid-table. That would be, that's a season. A season they remember for generations if you finish 10th in the English Premier League. And it's not, like you say, where the guys who with the best ambitions would settle for. You look back to a lot that what's made about Eddie Howe is the fact that he's sort of done well at Bournemouth, and he's been unemployed for a number of months now. But I do see a lot of parallels between him and Brendan Rodgers. I accept that Brendan did have the Liverpool experience. I agree that obviously he's not had that big job in England yet. But by the same token, if we're sitting here 2 years ago, if Eddie Howe's name was linked every time a managerial vacancy, so-called promotion above the Bournemouth job became available, anytime the Everton job looked up for grabs, or there was, listen, if Eddie Howe had perhaps got the Arsenal job a couple of years ago, in a similar fashion to the way that Brendan got the Liverpool job, his star was rising, there's no denying it, but he wasn't the A-lister that I would argue that he is now. But Howe could have had the opportunity at that point to make a name for himself at a club like that. I don't think there would have been too many people would have batted an eyelid, because they see the talents that he undoubtedly has, which is why I think it would be a fantastic appointment if Celtic managed to pull it off. But even going back, I'm a keen listener to some of the Football Writers podcast down in England, and I remember his name being touted with the England job as well. So it's so the idea that the Daily Record and all their pals seem to be pushing now that it's a small time, and he's never managed. He won't no pressure or anything like that. For all we're saying that the Bournemouth job or the Sheffield United job, they're not the most glamorous. They come with pressures of their own. If you manage in the English Premier League, for all it's a bit of a circus and it's overhyped and overblown, if you do a decent job at it down there, then you've got to be worth something.
Yeah.
Yeah. You summed that up perfectly well there. The way I look at it, as I always say as well, the English Premier League as James said, look at Scotland like a backwater league for people to go towards the end of their careers. I think the Eddie Howe thing, maybe bar Brendan Rodgers, is quite out of the norm, that a young up-and-coming manager wants to try and succeed at Celtic Football Club. Now, moving on to the likes of the director of football, as James said, Richard Hughes seems to be his preferred choice, but the Celtic board are quite pushing this Fergal Harkin routine with a couple of people like analysts and backroom teams coming from Manchester City. Now, James, do you think Eddie Howe will be the person that will kind of make Desmond back down from Harkin, or do you think Desmond will be firm set in appointing his friend?
Well, that's a good question, actually. The thing is, I wrote a piece the other day that said that if Eddie Howe takes the job, he will probably be the most powerful Celtic manager since Martin O'Neill. And I'm glad that Howe is making demands, because it makes it clear that Howe's not going to be content to just accept whatever the board wants to give him. He's got ideas of his own, and he's got a vision of his own that he wants to be able to control completely. I don't think it's so much a case of them backing down. See, I think Desmond, more than Law anyway, Desmond likes the idea of having a strong character in the dressing room. I think Dermot Desmond subscribes to the view that the manager should run the show. This is why Desmond's tried to hire Keane twice. Because, you know, a lot of clubs in England won't touch Keane because they're worried that Keane will rock the boat. Desmond doesn't seem to be concerned. It doesn't seem to have bothered him that Keane would be one of those guys that would come in and cause all sorts of chaos and demand all sorts of stuff and want standards to be raised across the boards and no brook any interference in what he was doing. And Dermot Desmond doesn't seem to have any problem with that. So I don't think it's a case of I'm backing down as such. I think that if Eddie Howe comes in and has got demands and his ideas are good and they're sound ideas, I think Desmond would be happy to accept them and go along with it and be like, well, this proves he's the right guy. He wants total control of his own destiny, and as a guy who, you know, admires that, I can go with that. I can get behind that. I mean, there's a famous story about Martin O'Neill wanting to spend £6 million on Chris Sutton, and Dermot Desmond said it was the only time that he ever kind of snapped back at me is when I said to him, that's an awful lot of money to spend. Are you sure that we should be spending it? And he said, you're not spending it, I'm spending it. This is my decision. I've made this. This is the guy I want. And he said, and at that point, I knew we'd made the right choice in manager.
Yeah,
so, I mean,
I mean, what concerns me, though, is the whole, from my point of view, the whole Keane thing. I mean, I'm pretty vocal about it on different podcasts, and especially our one as well. I just didn't see the whole narrative of why Keane should be a Celtic manager. Yes, I can understand that he's a strong personality, that he won't take no shit, so to speak. But again, Neil Lennon was meant to be all them things, and it failed. But going to you, Anthony. In terms of Eddie Howe making the demands like Richard Hughes, and I also think it's vital that he gets a choice, or at least a decision in his coaching staff, instead of being thrusted with Kennedy and Strachan. But do you think, obviously, as James said, if Eddie's making these demands and Desmond's going, as if they're sound enough, we'll do it, do you think he's thinking to himself, this guy is the right man if he wants to make demands to me?
I certainly hope so. I mean, going with the director of football, purely on a selfish point, I wouldn't mind David Webb because we interviewed him on this channel, so it might give us a bit more traffic, you know. But no, in terms of your question, Stephen, I would be encouraged. I read James's piece as I often do, the one he mentioned about how potentially being the most having the greatest level of autonomy since O'Neill, because obviously, as he points out in the article, this is the first managerial appointment that doesn't necessarily going to involve Lawwell long term for the best part of 2 decades. You know, he'll obviously be there when he's probably unveiled, but you know, it's not very long now until he's out the door in the summer. So you know, this decision's more for the future rather than the past. I would be delighted to know that if he's making those sort of demands, because like we were just speaking on, it sort of gives the idea that he's potentially sitting about, you know, putting roots down here for a wee while. It's not just up, maybe win a league or two, and then the minute one of the Sheffield United job becomes available again, he's away again. So if he's thinking of coming up here long term, and trying to, you know, build something like he did at Bournemouth, just on a far bigger and more more successful scale, then I'm all for it. As I say, he was always my preferred choice of candidate. I mean, I'll be honest, I absolutely love sitting down on Sky on a Super Sunday and Roy Keane's on, because Roy Keane's one of my footballing heroes growing up. You know, I'm Celtic first, last and always, but I do have a wee soft spot for Manchester United, and it's purely because of that team in the 90s, you know, not just the class of 92, but Roy Keane himself. Just his standards were so high, and he's very intelligent to listen to, comment on the game from that point of view as a pundit. But that's not, you know, the way that he speaks now, it makes for great television, but I don't think this generation of players necessarily respond positively to those kind of. You can only go to that well so many times before in the same way that it happened with Neil at several clubs, including theirs, unfortunately. I think that sort of approach, that kind of autocratic, you know, you will do as I say, it maybe works for a short term, but I think Celtic, we really have to be building long term, and guys like Eddie Howe and Brendan are off that approach, that sort of, more holistic kind of approach, as it were.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. James, I want to throw something to yourself. I heard this of a Celtic state of mind by Kevin Graham, who does some podcaster. He said that Eddie Howe was offered the job in November, but on Roger say so, he was told to reject it because of Peter Lawwell. Now, what we've seen now is obviously Peter Lawwell is leaving at the end of the season, and maybe that's kind of swayed his decision. But does that just show the type of character that Lawwell was, that there's ex-managers advising potential new managers not to take the job if he's there?
I used to think that some of the stories about Lawwell had to be exaggerated. There were so many, and they were so bad about his interference in all sorts of different aspects of the team. I used to think that they had to be exaggerated, and the whole Rodgers affair kind of took the blinkers off on me, because it was crystal clear that Rodgers chafed about his interference, and I think Rodgers considered Law to be a negative influence on his ability to build the kind of team that he wanted. I mean, the famous transfer window where we lost John McGinnon, where we lost Timothy Castagna and these guys. I mean, the scouting department did its job. The management team analysed the players, identified the targets, and Rodgers at that time, it's clear to me that Rodgers at that time was working towards a long-term plan, at least as far as 10 in a row was concerned, and getting to the end of this season before he made a decision. It's clear anyway that Rodgers was working on building something to the point where even if he left at the end of 10 in a row, he was going to leave behind him a stable club that had an extra couple of years in the Champions League groups or whatever, right? And he felt that summer that those efforts were completely undermined by what Law did. Whether it was haggling with Hibs over a couple of $100,000 over McGinnon, I know there are ins and outs to that story, and it wasn't completely Celtic's fault, but I always said that Law played a bad hand very badly. He didn't even bluff particularly well. He didn't even try to bluff particularly well. I mean, there were pressures that we could have applied to Hibs in terms of the fact that Lennon was there as manager, and we could have applied over Rod Petrie's head in terms of, well, we've made a good offer. It's money that the manager needs to spend. We could have shook things up a wee bit there behind the scenes, got Lennon making demands on Petrie, sell him again so I can get the money, whatever it was. And Law just played the whole thing so amateurishly, so terribly, that we never had the chance, really. And what swung it for me was the night of the AEK Athens game at Celtic Park. And I was sitting here in front of the computer, and I was getting ready to watch a game on the telly, and I heard Chris McLaughlin on BBC Radio Scotland say that a Celtic director had slammed the manager for his comments at the press conference the day before about how long transfer deals were taking. And I wrote that story that night, and people screamed about it. Oh, we're taking Chris McLaughlin's word for it. And I said, Chris McLaughlin said a Celtic director told him this, said this to him. If Chris McLaughlin is lying, he will never be in Celtic Park again. Are we believing Chris McLaughlin tonight? I believe Chris McLaughlin. And I was at a meeting at Celtic Park the following day with Pat McVeigh altered with Peter Law, and I knew 2 minutes after walking in the room that Peter Law was the guy who spoke to Chris McLaughlin the night before and trashed the manager on the eve of on the night of a Champions League game. And I knew we were in deep shit that night. I knew we were in real trouble. But the following day, seeing Law and hearing his justifications for why that had happened, I knew that the clash between the two of them was so bad that we weren't going to get out of it all the way to 10 in a row. I knew that Rodgers was going to leave. I didn't know what the timing was going to be, but I knew that at the end of the season, at the very latest, that he was going to go. There was no way he was going to stay another day beyond the end of that campaign. And I just knew the attitude that day was that the club was on the right and Rodgers was in the wrong. And I know Rodgers was a bit egocentric and whatever, but it was obvious, it was evident that the clash of personalities was too much to bear. And I think from that moment on, Rodgers believed he was being undermined. And when we signed Marion Sved in the January window just before he left, I mean, he could not have been more dismissive of that if he'd actually said the guy is shite and I'd want nothing to do with it. It was
I mean,
dreadful. And I think
that story's kind of
thinking about all the stories I heard about Law and all the other times that he had allegedly interfered and allegedly overruled the manager. Like when Samaras wanted a new contract, and the manager wanted to keep him. And Joe Ledley wanted a new deal, and the manager wanted to keep him. And Law overruled him on both counts. And it's stuff like that. And you think to yourself, you've got no business doing that. If the manager wanted the guy and there was a budget for keeping the guy, you had no business interfering in that. And I know that happened. And I know these stories are true now. And I don't think any good manager would have come and worked under that.
No, I mean, that story has kind of left me shocked. I've never heard that story before. So that points to me that, as you said, the relationship between Rodgers and Lawwell was over before the season even got going. I was at Rodgers' last game against Motherwell, and just that day, I think Leicester announced the sacked their manager at the time, and my friend turned around to me and goes, "The Leicester job's up for grabs." And I turned around at the end of the game and goes, "That's his last game," and it was. And you could just tell with the demeanour on the pitch, he was going around the whole stadium clapping the fans. Who does that after winning against Motherwell, especially during the season? And you could just tell that he was going to go. And as you rightly pointed out there, James, I have to say that's kind of left me a bit like, wow, the whole Lowell saying them comments to Chris McLaughlin, and then on the eve of a Champions League game. I mean, Anthony, what's your reaction to that? Because I'm kind of like, wow.
I must admit, I know the story because James, on the night that Rodgers, or the day after Rodgers left, he wrote, and I actually wrote it on your on the page. I mean, James pens many a good article. Don't get me wrong, but it was a brilliant kind of in-depth sort of analysis of sort of behind the scenes the relationship between Rodgers and Lawwell, and I remember him commenting on that story. And like you say, as the time has went on, and when you look back in hindsight, you could see the writing was on the wall from around that period. It was, very, very public, sniping at each other and hanging out their dirty laundry in public. We didn't see it crashing quite as badly as it did, but it's hindsight's a wonderful thing. But yeah, it's a story I was aware of, but it doesn't shock me in the slightest.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'd never even heard in England of that story. I remember around about the time that Chris McLaughlin said that, but obviously I didn't know who it was, and it's just to be told her it was Peter All literally sniping the manager on the eve of a Champions League game. It makes you wonder what else has he done. As James rightly pointed out, the likes of Ledley and Samaras, these guys were stars for Celtic, especially Samaras on his game was untouchable, and letting them types of players go for literally nothing is shambolic. But after just to go back to what I was previously saying about the Lowell leave at the end of the season, do you think that's potentially swayed Eddie Howe to take the job?
Possibly. I mean, we'll never know. Probably, the absolute certainty to that question. I can only say I'm glad that Lowell is going, and I know I've been quite vocal about that. And like you say, it definitely does ring bells with the fact that, like you've said before, Stephen, that Eddie Howe's been out of a job since November. So why does it seem to be taking so long? Especially when we could all see the way this season was panning out. If that call had been made, or if we had a chance to get somebody like Howe back in November, this season, even although we were starting to fall behind quite quickly in November, I reckon the season was salvageable. It was just the dithering and delay that's it's cost us dearly. We'll never know for sure, and even especially if he does get unveiled, it's certainly not a question he'll answer. But I do think football's a small world. It would be very naive to think that Eddie Howe and Brendan don't have some form of contact with each other. I think it's very possible that that's the case.
Yeah, I think it's very, very public knowledge as well that Eddie Howe looks up to Brendan Rodgers in a way. He's been to training sessions, and Rodgers has took him under his wing and showed him how he does things, his methods, his type of training regimes. And I've watched a lot of documentaries on Eddie Howe, and The Coach's Voice was a good one when he beat Chelsea. the training one recently, which was going around Twitter. I mean, that type of guy, just the way he is on the training ground, you can tell all the players love that. They're speaking to them and telling them what to do, going through certain phases of play. And as you rightly said, Anthony, the old school manager wouldn't really strike me as kind of doing that. They'd be just the motivator behind the scenes. But in terms of James, if the new management team gets announced, let's say within 2 weeks, and we know the players, some players are come to the end of their contracts and some players have made moves to leave, likes of Christie, Edward, for example. What players do you think Eddie Howe or a potential new manager, in case it's not Eddie Howe, but we all hope it is, but what type of players could be convinced to stay at Celtic for another season or another couple of seasons?
I wonder if Ryan Christie can be convinced to stay. I know Ryan Christie's dad spoke a lot about his son having ambitions to play in England and stuff like that, right? But I think there's a general kind of unhappiness at Celtic Park this season and last season. Professional footballers like to be tested and they like to be challenged. I always think about it. This is going to sound ridiculous, right? But I think about it in terms of season 2 of The Office. If I'm right, season 2 of The Office. You know,
I know where you're going with this, James.
You remember when Wernham Hogg, the branch that David Brent runs, incorporates the other branch, and all their workers come over and they join the team. Now, David Brent's mob are a chaotic, disorganised lot, and they're always playing practical jokes on each other and stuff and having a laugh and whatnot. And the other lot are much more professional and much more disciplined, and they come over on their board shitless. They're all sitting around and they're looking at their colleagues and they're thinking, how does this place even run? And when they have a team meeting to like integrate everybody and Brent's asking them how they're getting on, they're all sitting there and they're all like, we want more work today. We don't just want to be sitting about. We don't, you don't give us anything to do. You don't challenge us. You don't make it fun to come into work. And I think there was a kind of an element of that in the last 2 years at Celtic. I think the players were used to a certain standard and a certain high standard and certain things being maintained, and they would discuss previous games and they would talk about tactics and they would do training in a certain way and they prepare for scenarios in games. Say a player gets sent off or a player goes off injured, or what happens if we go a goal down and we've got to make this substitution. And they talked about that and they did all that stuff. And then all of a sudden it was all stopped and it was all gone. And it was basic run round the washing poles again. And these guys are like, well, what the hell? And all of a sudden, the standards that they were used to aren't there any longer. And I think there's a lot of unhappiness at Celtic as a result of that. And I think a lot of these guys thought, well, we thought that this was a massive, ambitious, forward-thinking club, because I know there were players like Tom Rogic and James Forrest, for example, right? Those guys were leaving the club before Brendan Rodgers became manager. Those guys were gone. James Forrest had both feet out the door and his bags packed. And then all of a sudden, we make an appointment that just blows them all away. And all of a sudden, it's Celtic are this progressive, forward-thinking, ambitious club, and we're going to go for Champions League qualification. We're going to try and get to the second stages. And all of a sudden, these guys who wanted away are like, well, wait a minute. Maybe it's worth hanging around here to see where this is going. And I think that if Howe comes in and Howe's got the right ideas, this is one of the reasons why I would like him to come in straight away. I think he might be able to convince somebody like Ryan Christie, who I think Ryan Christie's gone backwards like no other player I have ever watched. Ryan Christie was a great player to watch a couple of years ago, running with the ball, scoring great goals and whatnot. And for all intents and purposes, Neil Lennon had turned him into a player who just shoots from outside the box every chance he gets to try to go. His game has regressed to the point where it's an internet joke now, where even the opposition is trolling us about it before games, right? And of course, he would score, wouldn't he, and shut them up. But that's the regression in his performances as a player, and the fall in his personal standards. And I think the right manager could convince a guy like that Celtic is where the future is, and stay here. And it might even be good enough for Ayer. It won't be good enough for Eddie, because Eddie's going to go. But Ayer and Christie, I think there's a chance of making these guys sign new deals. And
you're 100%. You're 100% right. I mean, if Eddie Howe's watching the training videos Celtic are putting on their Twitter account, he's probably going to himself, "What am I going to walk into?" It just seems. It just seems to be the same thing they're doing, as you said. Run around the washing poles, hit a few passes, and then that's it, boys. That's it for the day. But I've been very vocal in this podcast about Christie. I mean, to the point where people are always saying to me on the group chat, "Did you mention Ryan Christie again?" Unfortunately, yes, I am going to mention him again. I just think, for me, I couldn't care less. If this is the way he's going to be, I understand a manager can come in and change a player. Yes, I get that. And the way he's been in the last year and a half, especially, he's been another shambles apart from the odd goal out of 400 shots. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't care if he left. That's being totally honest. Get a transfer fee for him and let him go. I'd be focusing more on the players like Ayer, trying to convince him for a couple more years. And then the resale value could be talking upwards of £20 million if he gets his performances back. Eddie, as you said, it's too late for Eddie. He wants to go. I think he's been promised so much at Celtic, and Celtic have just failed to deliver. I don't know about you, Anthony. Where do you stand on any players? Do you think that we haven't spoke about could be convinced to stay or at least take part in the next few seasons?
The guys you mentioned are all certainly fit that bill. Perhaps, like you say, Ron, although I accepted it's Falkirk, but I did feel that him and Turnbull, it could be something worth exploring. You know, that the two of them perhaps playing together on the same team. And I think, as James says, with a proper manager in place, he could possibly be convinced, because you know, he's not the Rogic of 2-3 years ago, where he maybe could have walked into quite a few teams down in England, especially. I know there was obviously chat of him going to Qatar last year, and it sort of fell through. Another player that I would be quite interested to see, it's not even necessarily with how, it's just more on the terms of if it could financially happen or not. And he's a bit of an enigma, but Mo El-Yunusi, I remember I took my wee boy to the Hampden semi-final against Hibs last season, and he absolutely ran the show, and he was in a real purple patch in that loan spell. And then he got injured just before the final against Rangers, and he didn't really get back into the team from then. But I was delighted when we got him back in the summer. But just, and as much as like everything else that's happened this season, it's just there's just something went astray. But despite all that, and despite being played out of position so many times, he's still our second highest goal scorer. And the wee goal on Wednesday, Saturday night, suggests that there's definitely a player in there, and maybe with a guy like Howe at the helm, it could really work. But yeah, apart from that, I think we have to be honest. A lot of the loan signings are going to games. I think Eddie's it's pretty much over, and but I think not everyone's going to go. I mean, we're not going to have 30 new players coming in. We've got to be realistic that there is still going to be some guys from this season that will be there next year. It's just all about trying to get the right ones.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought up El-Nusi, and I like him as a player. But as you said, this season especially, he's been played left mid, left wing, centre attacking, up front, and James, I'll go to you for this one. Would you like to see El-Nusi come back, or do you think this is too much of a transfer fee to lay out for someone that hasn't really showed his best form this season, even though he's still our second highest top goal scorer?
This is a difficult one, because obviously something has gone spectacularly wrong in the way the team is set up, the way the team is coached and trained. And I think it makes it extremely hard to judge whether we're watching players who blow hot and cold and a team that blows hot and cold. So you don't know whether it's something that's affected the whole squad or whether it's a certain individual players just starting up. I mean, I don't want to move the conversation away from El-Nusi and towards somebody else, but I watch a guy like Shane Duffy and I think to myself, you've played in the Premier League in England for years and never looked like this player. Who is this player who we have signed who cannot do even the basic things right? How can he have played at a level like the Premier League for years and be the guy that we've been watching? How can Vasilis Barkas be a full international and a guy who 3 or 4 teams are lining up to take off our hands and be as bad as the guy we've been watching? And so when El-Nusi doesn't turn it on in certain games and does in other games. You don't know whether that's the player Elyounoussi is all the time, or whether it's just part of the general regression that's involved every player in our squad this season. I mean, I think the guy's got all the talent in the world. I mean, we tried to sign him before he went to England. Yeah. And we obviously liked him enough that we paid 2 huge loan fees to get him to the club. I mean, you can see a mile away that there's a player there. I mean, my God, the guy's got as much talent as anybody in the squad. But it's a lot of money to spend on a blind punt, which is what it would be right now, because we really don't have any idea whether we're watching a flawed player or just a good player being dragged down by a flawed team. Right now, it's just
I think that's a great. I think that's a great point, because as you rightly pointed out, the likes of Moy Elyounoussi, you can see there's a cracking player in there, and Duffy's like a jigsaw puzzle that you just can't figure out. As you said, he playing in the top level of like English football, he never looked out of place. The likes of Arsenal, Man United, he always gives good performances. But yes, he's had personal issues off the field. But again, we have to judge what we see on the pitch, and he hasn't been anywhere near the standard that Celtic require. For me, Duffy is a no-go, even under a new management structure. I think it's kind of the bridge is burned, so to speak. And I think even in his facial expressions, when you get the pictures from training, he doesn't look happy. And maybe I'm reading too far into that, but that's what it looks like for me. The other known players, John Joe Kenny is the most boring footballer I've ever seen in a Celtic shirt. Diego Laxalt gives us a bit of flair, a bit of oomph on the left-hand side. But again, he's been coached to regress. He started off so well, and he just kind of went down to the level that the rest of his teammates are at. Then you go to Moy, and you're going to yourself, that's the only fella from the loan players that maybe has a chance of staying on next season. But yet again, you're thinking of that transfer fee. What will Southampton want? And you're talking probably upwards of £7 million, because they paid, what was it, 18 million? Round about that for Moy Elyounoussi. Yeah, so, and another thing that baffles me as well, Moy Elyounoussi and Albion Nieti play with each other at Ball. And why has Celtic not tapped into that and tried to play them more together? That could maybe
one of the many mysteries. I know.
So it's like a Rubik's Cube Celtic this season. But just to move on to what was seen as well was Chris Commons, an ex Celtic player, which by all accounts he was a brilliant Celtic player. But I'll go to you, Anthony, first for this one. I find it quite interesting when ex players come out, and the majority of time, it's never to have anything positive to say about Celtic Football Club or the position they find themselves in. Why do you think that is, Anthony?
For probably a lot of reasons, Stephen. The one thing I'll say before I go any further, I just want to say I would never ever want ex-Celtic players to that go into sort of media or punditry work to ever carry on in the manner of which guys like Derek Johnston do, or Mark Haitley do, or even McCoist. McCoist's actually pretty awful. Or the King's idiot himself, Chris Boyd. These guys are an absolute embarrassment. They are shamelessly partisan and cannot see anything that sees their own club in a bad light. I always find it, not even just in football, but in other aspects of life as well, to challenge the people that you're most, you sort of align with most. Challenge them. It's healthy. It keeps everyone on their toes. I've got absolutely nothing against people that used to play for Celtic criticising Celtic when it's right to do so. But it seems to be just the way that ex-Celtic players carry on in the media, that it's almost like they're trying to curry flavour with people that are never going to be on their side, just to try and sort of say, I know I used to play for Celtic, but I'm trying to be impartial now. And it makes a mockery of the arguments that they very often come out with. And even the ones who, a lot of the time, I can agree with, I think sometimes they say they go too far for their own good. Sometimes an example of that kind of criticism would aim at perhaps at somebody like Chris Sutton, who nails it. He's really great a lot of the time, but then there's other times you're like, you're just trying to cause controversy there, Chris. And I'm no further. My personal favourite is John Hartson, I must admit, of ex-Celtic players anyway. I think Big Bad John is a fantastic, balanced, but makes no bones about and makes no apologies for where his loyalties lie. But if we're Chris Commons isn't the only one. We've got Charlie Nicholas does it, but done it every week in, week out before Sky binned him. Davy Provan, whenever he deems himself, Scottish football worthy of, his opinion, it'll always come from a negative slant or a sly dig, or not even a sly dig at Celtic half the time. It's just it's very blatant. But Commons, and especially Commons probably annoys me the most. Probably just for the fact of the outlet that he chooses to do it, in the Daily Mail, just an absolute a vehicle of hatred. How any Celtic player could ever take a coin for that print, it just astounds me. Not especially considering how much him and his wife sort of bought into the Celtic way. But his argument regarding how, if we're being specific, his argument was all over the place. He was sort of making digs about how the fact that Bournemouth Stadium couldn't hold the crowd that came to welcome Brendan Rodgers. Well, it's no Eddie Howe's fault what the capacity Bournemouth Stadium is. As I said earlier, I accept that Eddie Howe has not yet had the, in inverted commas, big job in England. But if he had have received one of the bigger jobs in years gone by, I don't think anyone would have batted an eyelid. I think most experts would have said, well, he's clear. You can clearly see he's a guy going places, and he's got the credentials to take on one of the big jobs. And we are one of the big jobs. I would say we're one of the elite jobs. And for Chris Commons to make so many of the silly and petty comments that he does on a regular basis, particularly about how, but he's listen, this isn't a once-off. It's practically every time there's a microphone in front of him, he'll come away with it. He's the exact same when he's covering the matches on Sky as he is on the print media as well. It's so frustrating because, as a player, I did like to watch him. He obviously had many as a great performance in a Celtic shirt, but I do think he did get his head did get too big. I thought he became arrogant in his latter years, and I'm sure James will allude to. I'll not go any further because I know James will probably say more about his dressing room antics. But he's a guy who's really soured his name, and for somebody who you'd normally sort of hold in high regard, for me now he's just another ex-player with a dig who wants to criticise us for no reason, for a reason which I can't fathom.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just literally switched the on button there, Anthony. That was a brilliant way to come across it.
Yeah, I think I've been ever since I read that article yesterday. I've been waiting for the all clear to vent my fury.
Yeah, I mean, see, for me, for years, my biggest bugbear was Charlie Nicholas, watching him before Champions League games, putting Celtic down, and the usual comments about it's only Scottish football, blah blah blah. But they weren't saying all these things when they were putting on the famous green and white. And as soon as they leave, it's like just a fest of ex-players. Andy Walker, to a certain extent, I know he came off of a cracker about Desmond, which the majority of us actually supported what he said at that point. But in the majority of it, he always speaks down about Celtic. And it's like these guys go away, and it's just this bitter pill that they never seem to swallow. I mean, James, I'm interested to hear what you say. For me, it's just like, why do these players do this? They should be supporting the club. But again, what Anthony said, don't be cheerleading the club. If there's things that need to be picked at, pick at them. But don't be coming at every single bit of information or news coming out of Celtic Park.
I mean, I could not endorse more highly everything that he just said there. I mean, I wrote about the Commons article yesterday. I thought it was hilariously bad. I really genuinely did. I thought it was hilariously bad, and that's what it is that bugs me the most about all of it. And it's not even so much the anti-Celtic nature of what these guys write; it's the utter stupidity of what they write, and it has echoes in the utter stupidity of what the Chris Boyds and that right. And I think to myself, did nobody ever play for either their club, their clubs, or our club who has a spark of intelligence, who you could have given a newspaper call at me? Why is it these utter dickheads? Why is it the stupidest, absolute half-wits who get newspaper columns and get places on the radio? This can't be representative of the intellectual level of people who play for these clubs. It cannot possibly be. So why are these the people we get? You look at somebody like Michael Stewart. Oh my God, I would give everything I own for Michael Stewart who played for Celtic for even 5 minutes, so I can say, there you go, Ex Celtic in the media who shows the rest of them how it's done. God almighty. Michael Stewart talks more sense than, honestly, his average utterance has more intelligence behind it than these people could muster if he was somehow able to wire all the brain cells together.
Oh, man. I understand what you're saying. I mean, Chris Boyd, for me, as you said, it's you just look at him all the time on the TV and he's all smug, he's all smiling, and he's sitting there with his puffer jacket on, standing so wide a bus could fit for his legs, and you're going, what? As you said, these guys get these positions just because of the clubs they played for, but they're thick as chips. And you look at it as well. As you said, Michael Stewart's brilliant. I love listening to Michael Stewart. I think he speaks well and he's impartial to both sides and he gives an honest view. Anthony, you look at these types of players, Chris Boyd, Chris Commons. Do you think maybe that we should go in and replace them?
Oh, listen, I think we would do put it this way, we couldn't be any worse than them. Let's be honest. But no, listen, it's not just the ex-players. You know, I do for my sons tune into, you know, BBC Scotland Sports Sound some of the times, and again, you just think, you know, how are these guys in the positions they're in? It's astounding. As I say, Michael Stewart, I totally agree with. He's one of the rare good guys. As I say, I could not tell you which team Michael Stewart supports, to be honest, and I think that's a credit to him because obviously he had the United connection. He's played for. He's a big Edinburgh boy, so I'm assuming it's one of the two Hibs team, one of the two Edinburgh teams. But I genuinely couldn't tell you who it was, but who he supports, which is a credit to him because he comes across as intelligent but impartial. But yeah, if MD's wanting, if MD's needing a gig, you know, I've got a headset, you know, I can talk about football anytime MD wants me to.
Well, what we'll do a big skip and a hop here over to the next subject because we're going to be talking about that for hours in regards to reporting in Scotland and even over here where I'm from in Belfast. It's so left, it's unbelievable. I mean, but yeah, we'll move on to the Scottish Cup draw. So we're seeing that we were drawn against Rangers, our Glasgow Derby opponents will be another Glasgow Derby. What's your opinion, James? Can Celtic want to win the Scottish Cup if Eddie Howe is in charge, or if not? What's your preference?
I think we're certainly capable of winning it no matter who's the manager. I don't think that we've got any reason to fear them if Kennedy is in the dugout because we've outplayed them the last twice. And I mean, absolutely outplayed them the last twice. It's amazing that, you know, because when they had their one good game against us, you know, after we them like however many times in a row it was, and they had the one good game against us. I mean, they were screaming from the rooftops about how this represented a change in the trend and the tide had turned, and this proved that they could live with us and challenge us on the day. We've done it to them twice in a row. We've outplayed them twice in a row, and I haven't read a single bit of coverage that reflects that view, not one bit. But the crucial point is that we haven't won any of those two games. And that's frustrating. It's really frustrating, considering especially how many chances we made in the second one. Not so much the first one, because they won the game without having a shot on goal. I mean, that's an incredible stat. But we weren't that much more clinical in front of goal. We weren't that much better in front of goal than them that day. But that second game, the one at Celtic Park, just past, we completely outplayed them for the whole match, and we should have won that game comfortably. And again, it's the same old. It's the defending. It's the inability to learn from our mistakes that cost us. But we're due giving that mob a doing. We're due it.
Yeah, I don't understand why people.
We don't really fear from them.
Yeah. I don't understand why people fear the Rangers. They're nothing special to me. It's just a symptom, a symptom, like a symptom of Celtic season that we're not shambolic. We can't kind of fucking take advantage of being on top for the last 2 games and not get the result we wanted. I think personally we still have a better squad than them. I think all round it's internationals. There's better players, better technical players, and unfortunately it's just the way we've been coached this season and the way it's ended. It's ended in catastrophe in terms of the 10. But Anthony, are you confident that we can, as James rightly said, give them a doing and win the Scottish Cup?
Listen, absolutely. I mean, we've won it 40 times already, and the last 4 on the bounce. I don't see any reason why we can't go there and win. Because, like you say, the last couple of games, we've been by far the better team, just can't put the ball in the back of the net. And, you know, our luck's due to change at some point. But, you know, if we're going to win it for a 5th time, we're going to have to do it the most difficult way possible. So, yeah, but like you say, bring it on. Although the thing is, I've just seen earlier when the kickoff's going to be 4 o'clock on a Saturday, so for reasons unknown. So we're all probably going to be back in lockdown on the Sunday.
Yeah, 100% right. But in my opinion, I think personally, yes, we can do it. We can win the Scottish Cup. There's no, as James and Anthony you both said, there's no reason why we have to fear anybody. For me, the symptom of the season is us being poorly coached, and the same mistakes, the same defensive errors, set pieces seem to be a killer for us at the minute. And if we eradicate that for the next couple of games coming up, and especially the Scottish Cup run, there's no reason why we can't go on to win it. But guys, in terms of the main show, that's us complete. We've talked about everything we talked about, topics, Dominic McKay, Eddie Howe, that type of thing. So thank you for that. What we're going to move on to is the quiz. Now, the quiz is controversial. I mean, some people think I do them out of it, and some people think it should be them that's winning. But at the end of the day, it's who I hear first, and I have to go with that, unfortunately. So it's 5 questions, James. It's whoever gets the free first, whoever gets the majority of questions right. I'm not too technical about it, but I'll take the first person to hear. Okay, so let's make use of more of that. Are you ready to go?
Go on.
Yeah, go for it.
No problem at all. Have you got your finger on the buzzers, lads?
Ready to
go. So first question is, where did Celtic sign Ryan Christie from?
Aberdeen. Inverness.
Oh, what did you say, James?
Inverness.
I have to give it to James. You got your first answer wrong.
Yeah, go, first one wrong. He's been up at Aberdeen that many times. Oh, that was a rookie error.
Who gave Callum McGregor his Celtic debut?
Roy Dyler.
Anthony's in. That's 1 each. What is Musa Dembele's nickname?
Musa, the Huntscalper.
Yes, that's 2. Definitely. What is Celtic's biggest Glasgow derby win?
7-1.
Was that James? Did you say that?
Yes.
Yeah, that was James, yeah.
Yeah. Well done. That's 1957. And finally, if you guys were listening during the show, this is just to see who was listening, who's not. When does Dominic McKay start his role at Celtic?
April 16th.
Oh, no.
April 17th.
Is it 17th?
Oh, shit!
You've got one more chance on it. Yes. Anthony wins it.
Oh.
Anthony, you keep the credibility for the End of Celts podcast, guys. I mean, I think we've only, in regards to the guest, I think we've only been beaten twice, if I'm correct. I think that's a pretty good run. But guys, Anthony, thanks for coming on, and you'll be on again in the future as a regular contributor. And James, have you enjoyed your time on the podcast?
Brother, thank you very much for having me. I must say it was fun.
Yeah, no problem, James. And also anyone who
will comb the hair and come back on.
And also as well, guys who are listening, please check out James's Celtic blog. There's some fantastic articles, and it's well worth the read. I mean, there's some cracking ones. The Commons one stands out. It's brilliant. So thanks for coming on, James. And just a big shout out to our spin-off series. We did another series, spin-off series last night, which is going to be titled The Nopes 11. So basically, it's a combined worst 11, basically from the 1995 season upwards till now, which is very, very good. It was very well worth listening. William Dobbin does a fantastic job. He's the host, also along with John and Francis. It's a cracking show. But guys, until we speak again, which will be Friday, our usual podcast, stay well and keep safe. Hail, hail.